it's Jessii Vee. Oh my gosh, I feel like I haven't worn dark lipstick in so long. I feel like I'm back to my regular vampire self. As long as there's no lipstick in my teeth, because you know how that goes. So today's video is a super eerie one. Basically, we're gonna be talking about places in the world that should not exist. So the stories that I'm about to tell you are from real people in real life who have gone somewhere in the world, and the places that these people found are so out there and strange. And in a lot of the cases that I'm talking today, these people left that location, and when they went back, it wasn't there anymore. So it was almost as if it never existed at all. So I'm gonna tell a few of those stories, and then I actually have a story of my own that I've never really told anybody except for maybe a couple of my friends, and I had totally forgot about this story until today's video. So wow, isn't it so weird how you can have all of these memories in your brain that just sort of sit there and you totally forget about until you don't? Like, all of the memories from your life are like back here, like they're literally back here, and certain things will trigger them, like smells, tastes, sounds. Like the story I'm about to tell you, I might have forgotten for the rest of my life, so it's just a coincidence that I thought about this video and it came back. It was just napping back there and it came back. So let's get into these very eerie stories. I have all of my research in front of me if you see me like looking down, but I'm gonna try and tell it without looking, okay? I feel like I'm back in elementary school where you have to like memorize your speech and then say it in front of the whole class. And let me just tell you, cue cards were like my best friend. Anyways, the first story we're gonna talk about is called A Photo-Filled Shack in the Woods. And once I hear shack in the woods, I think about the movie Cabin in the Woods, and like ever since I saw that movie, I just don't want to go like deep in the woods in a cabin. So here we go. Once I was walking through the woods with a friend of mine, and we were just messing around, telling jokes and climbing on trees. After about half a mile out, we found a small shed and had no idea who owned it, so we went inside. It was extremely dark in there, so we had to turn on the flashlight on our phone. So can I just say, first of all, I feel like their first mistake was even going in there. I just want to know, are you guys the classic horror movie people who will like go into a creepy place even though you know it's wrong? Even though like deep down inside you're like,
hey, you know what? This sounds like an exact plot of a horror movie, but like who cares? I don't care.
Although, I'd probably go inside too. So this is when the two friends found this huge collection of photographs that had absolutely no context. Like, some of the pictures were of people, some were of animals, some were of places. And it seemed as though the pictures were from all around the world, because there's pictures of the pyramids, the Colosseum, the Eiffel Tower, very well-known places around the world. So nothing really related. It wasn't like they were all from one place, like this forest. It was like whoever took these really traveled. And what was so creepy is that they were all stuck on the wall of one side of the shack, just put up there with duct tape. But then they started to notice some weirder photos, so it went from like sort of normal, and as you looked more and more, there was a lot of weird pictures of people like dressed up in strange costumes and had like really sinister faces. Like, there was one photo, it says how there was a man who was just standing with the head of a bat like on his shoulders. And then what's even creepier is that they turned their heads and they saw that in the corner of the shack there was a camera on the wall, and they assumed it was the camera that took all of these photos. And they didn't want to steal anything, and they got really creeped out, so they left the shack. And when they got home, they told all of their friends, all of their family, and of course everyone they told was really intrigued and really confused and really creeped out as well. So these two friends decided to take more of their friends to see this shack the next day, and when they arrived, all that was left was a chair. The shack was gone, and just this wooden chair sat where the shack used to be. And what's even weirder to end off this story is that sitting on this wooden chair was another photograph, which seemed to be the last photograph they could find, and it was a picture of the shack. So this is a completely true story. It's so scary, and of course no one believed that the shack was actually there, because when they arrived it was gone. So this is one of those places that was claimed to have existed, but no one ever saw except these two people. But at least there was photographic evidence. Okay, the next story is called The Town That Disappeared at Night. I was driving very late at night in New England, and there was a fog, a very dense fog, like Silent Hill levels of fog. And it says that this guy is driving on back roads, so like country roads, off of the main roads, and he's driving along, and there's just tons of fog around him, and suddenly his car headlights go out, which is not a situation that's very good when you're driving at night and when you're driving in intense fog. So his his headlights go out and he decides to sort of pull his car over to the side of the road because it's obviously unsafe to drive if you can't see. Then his car starts making this really weird noise and his engine light turns on. So basically nothing about his car is working at all. It just like, it was like, no, I'm not driving today. You know when your car just like gives up? So his car won't start. He is in the middle of nowhere. It's dark. That is such a terrifying situation. He tries calling people like any other person would do. There's no service. So he just decides to wait until the morning. So he reclines his car chair, he goes back and tries to take a nap. Now, it's really important to note for this story that while he's in his car, he's in such a rural area that there's no houses around him. He doesn't see any light at all. It's literally pitch black. So he goes to sleep and morning comes around, and this is where it gets really weird. When he wakes up, the fog has gone away, it's light, and when he looks around, there's an entire neighborhood on both sides of the road, like tons of identical houses. And directly in front of him, he's parked at what looks like a Bates Motel house. Like if you've seen that show, it's a really creepy house, super old looking, super like sinister and eerie. And what creeped this man out so much was that when he pulled over to the side of the road, he was sure he was like in the middle of a forest or a field. He knew he was not near any town at all. And you'd think if he was like driving in the middle of all these houses and this hotel that he would see at least one light on. So he attempted to turn on his car one last time, and guys, it turned on right away. His engine was fine, his headlights were fine, his phone suddenly had service. And as he was driving away, he kept trying to look for a sign that had the name of this weird small town he was in, but there were no signs anywhere. When he finally got out of this weird town, he looked at a map and this town never existed on the map. He asked a ton of people who lived in New England. They had no idea this town existed, and when he went back to find it, he just couldn't. So this is another one of those places that should not exist, and I don't know, imagine going through an experience like that and nobody believes you and you're just so confused. And what's really creepy is that in my research, I found so many of these cases, like, and they're all so similar that I'm not gonna go through all of them because they're like identical, but there are so many stories of people arriving in this strange small town at night that they had never seen before, and the next day it's just not there anymore, so. Okay, this next story really freaks me out because it takes place in Canada, and I'm Canadian. I live in Canada, so. This one is called The Canadian Blair Witch, and if you guys have ever seen The Blair Witch Project, that is a really creepy movie, and it's just about these people who go into the woods and they're being tormented by this witch, and she doesn't show herself. She actually just puts like symbols in the trees, and there's like little stick people hanging down, and like, it's hard to explain unless you've seen it, but it's one of those really unsettling horror movies that's like first person film. What's it called? What's it called when the person is like filming the whole thing like first person? Found footage. I hate those things. All right, here we go. The Canadian story. 20 some odd years ago, I took my kids and parents on a driving trip through the eastern coast of Canada. But my dad decided to take this shortcut off the main highway down a dirt road. Okay, why does this sound like my dad? When I was a kid, I went on like all these road trips with my family all the time. And my dad always felt like he just knew what he was doing all the time. And yes, most of the time he did. And he would always be like, I know shortcuts. And he'd like take us these different routes. And like most of the time we got to our destination just fine, but we have gotten lost a few times, so I feel like this is like my dad's story. So this family's driving down the road, and about 5 minutes down this dirt road, things start getting very quiet because when you're driving on a highway, you know, there's cars everywhere, it's loud, and once they're on this dirt road, they don't hear the sound of any animals. They barely even hear their car like moving on this road. It's just super quiet all of a sudden. Like it says, we should have been able to hear birds or the trees rustling or cicadas, but there was nothing and it was too quiet. So this father starts slowing down because he starts to realize, hey, I have no idea where I'm going. So they decide to pull out this map because if this is 20 years ago, I'm assuming it's before we had all of these like GPS things and everything else. And they look at their map and the road they're on is not on the map, okay? It doesn't exist on this map. So that's when they all look out their windows, and hanging from all the trees are these really creepy stick people in sort of different designs that they're not sure what they even mean. It says some are just shaped shapes and others are more intricately made. They're just dangling and swaying slowly. Imagine being in that quiet forest on this dirt road and seeing that. I have like chills right now. So they decided to turn around as quickly as possible and drove away. And what's weird is that all the people sitting in the car, they had this horrible pressure in their head, like their ears were popping and it just wouldn't go away. And once they were back on the highway, everything went back to normal. Could you imagine if they kept driving down that dirt road? No. And then of course when they got back home from their trip, everyone they told didn't believe them, which why does that happen all the time? People have to have more trust and faith. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end off this video with my story. And guys, there's like, oh my gosh, hundreds of these places that shouldn't exist stories. So if you want me to do a part 2, definitely let me know because I'm super interested in this stuff. It just gives me weird vibes, but like I want to hear more. So okay, this story happened to me, gosh, how old was I? Maybe like 10 years old. And I was at a friend's cottage for the weekend and she had this massive forest behind her cottage and we always went into this forest to play hide and seek. We never went at night, okay, we knew better. We don't want no Blair Witch Project happening to us. We went during the day, but as you know, trees really shadow the sun. So even if it's during the day, forests are usually just dim anyway and creepy. So my friend was a seeker and I think I was with like 2 or 3 other people. So we all went into this forest to hide. And it wasn't like a giant forest, but it was a big enough space that hide and seek took like 15 minutes each round. And mind you, I had been in this forest like a handful of times before and I felt like I knew every single area by heart, but I was running off to find a spot and I ran into this clearing, which I had never seen before because there were so many trees in this forest, and suddenly I ran into this place where the trees were in a circle and there was this huge circle of grass with just nothing on it. I wonder if I could find like a picture of what it looked like online, but it was this big circular clearing in the forest where nothing was growing. And I remember there were these stones placed in the dirt that were like in circular patterns, and like looking back, it was like some alien type stuff. But when I was a kid, I just thought it was like, oh, maybe the next door neighbor's kids just decided to put rocks in cool patterns, which, hey, that could have been the case. I remember just being stunned and staring at this area like, why have I not seen this before? So I went back to tell my friends, and by that time it was like sunset and we had to go back in the house for dinner. So we went for dinner and we decided the next day I would take them to this place, and the next day we just couldn't find it. We were looking for like an hour and I felt like we hit every single part of this forest, but we could not find it. And I really wish I had a phone back then because I didn't get a phone till I was like 12 or 13 years old. I would have taken a picture and I couldn't. But they didn't really believe me, and I don't know if my friend ever found it because she had that cottage for I think 7 more years, and I wish I was still in contact with her. But yeah, it was just really weird. So comment down below if you've ever had a place that shouldn't exist experience. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you in my next one. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and yeah,